Hello everyone, this is part 9 of What If Naruto Trained Hinata, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist. To see more, comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Gaara walked to his seat as Sakura put the big cloak away and sat beside him as they continued some small talk. Naruto's jaw almost fell on the table. What just now happened? He barely made the sentence as Gaara looked up, almost smiling. Ah, Naruto, I see you and your wife have joined us. Now, what was it that you wanted to talk about? He sat up straight and folded his hands before him. If it's business, can it wait until after dinner? Naruto just nodded as Gaara looked to a door at the side of the room. A moment later servants came in with big plates with food and suddenly they saw that the table was completely prepared for dinner. Gaara was at the head of the oval table with Sakura and the little girl on his sides. To his left were Shikamaru and Temari hanging all over each other, a gap, and then opposite of him were Naruto and Hinata. I smell food. Kankuro smiled broadly as he jumped into the room trough one of the doors and took its place next to Shikamaru and Naruto. Immediately he began digging into the food and gave a quick nod to Gaara and a small wave to Naruto. Now, what was it? Gaara and Naruto had moved to a small chamber. There were two big chairs with red leather on with a small table between them where a maid placed some sake. I've stumbled onto something big, Gaara, something that will probably change our lives. Naruto smiled mysteriously as he grabbed his cup and took it down in one move. And what is this big thing? I don't know a better way to explain it than to show it, but I shall try. He grinned a bit after pouring himself some more sake. Good drink you got here. It's about our demons. Gaara sat straight up and leaned a bit in. And what with them? I don't know about you, but over the years every now and then I talked to him, sometimes more than others, most of the times when my life was on the line, most of the times I needed his power. Have you? Gaara just nodded as he drank some. On occasion I have talked with him, but it's not very easy as he is very annoying. A few nights ago, when me and Hinata were, Naruto started to stutter a bit. He just realized, besides a little prank here and there, he never really talked about ever, even during his years with Jiraiya. I know what. Come on, when we were doing it. I mean, at night. In the bedroom, Naruto turned a slight red as Gaara's lips rippled, his face closing into a smile and suddenly turning red as well. I get the idea, yay. Well, something happened, I don't know why, probably in the heat of the moment. As you could call it, they both quickly took a mouthful of sake and refilled the cups. Right. Anyways, at that moment, the seals and barriers that should have protected me against the Kyuubi and hold him inside me, broke. Gaara's eyes suddenly widened as sand came from every direction. In a split second he held up a small cloud in front of him. And you bring that here? He almost yelled as he formed a little wall between them. Yes, that is the only real reason I came here. I made peace with the Kyuubi. The wall of sand fell to the ground. Behind it, Gaara sat still, his hand still raised. How? So Naruto explained his story, a few chapters back. And how does this help me? I mean, I got a few similar seals but I don't want to release that idiotic demon into my mind. Gaara stood up as he drinks the last bit of sake. That's the point of us coming here. In the past few days I have been discussing it with the Kyuubi and we came to the conclusion that he could perhaps convince Shukaku to become his own self again. From what I heard of the Kyuubi, they were once friends. But their love for Kyuubi's wife tore them apart, and angered Shukaku. Not only that, but a few thousand years later he was still angry and found himself here, in Suna, where he found a woman that looked like Kyuubi's wife. I don't know how or why, but a few years later your people sealed him away and now he is inside you. If we were to calm him down, not only would your life become much better, you will also gain a friend, an ally and much power. Naruto grinned as Gaara sat down again. The last bits of dust left the room trough the few cracks and openings. Alright, we could try, but how do you suppose to do that? How can we calm a demon? Gaara peered into the small bottle and put it back as a hand of sand formed and took it out of the room. That's the easy part. We have to make a connection for the Kyuubi to talk to him. Shikamaru may have an idea how to do this, or so Tsunade suggested, but it shouldn't be hard. The next part requires a little more than just the two of us, I'm afraid. Naruto grabbed the back of his head as he laughed. The door opened again and the sand hand came floating in again with a new bottle. Are you trying to get me drunk here? He laughed even harder. I thought you could stand your ground when it comes to sake. Gaara had a dark grin over his face as he poured Naruto another cup. No, tell me, what is this second part you were talking about? After dinner Temari invited the two ladies to a bath in their hot spring. That would be troublesome, Shikamaru sighed as he continued on his way. Welcome back Kazekage-sama, we were starting to get worried. A girl at the front desk of the building bowed her head respectively as she noticed Naruto. A special guest today, Kazekage-sama. Gaara looked at Naruto and back to the girl. Yes, we are about to have a long meeting so I don't want to be disturbed. Oh, and call the council and tell them I had something important come up, he said as he passed the girl. She nodded happily as she picked up the phone and started to dial a number. Naruto almost drooled over the idea of Gaara getting such respect. Not only that, but the girl actually was happy to see him and was worried. Nice place you got here, but tell me, why was she worried? Gaara stopped in the middle of the hall and Naruto almost bumped into him. Normally I got home to eat dinner, then I return to work, I eat my breakfast here and during noon I train my students. He started walking again and turned around the corner. Nice office you got here. Naruto whistled as he looked around. It was almost creepy how much it looked like the Hokage's office, only the window was a bit smaller and the room had a side part with what seemed like a big empty room. Gaara walked to his desk and opened a drawer. Inside it was only a phone and beside it some scrolls and a brush with ink. He removed the plug from the phone and walked to the front of the desk again. Come out you two, he firmly spoke as he gazed around. Suddenly two shinobi puffed up in front of him. Yes, Kazekage-sama, one asked as the other one looked suspiciously over his shoulder at Naruto. Gan, Yin, you stay at the front door and don't let anyone in, ignore the sounds that will come from the inside. They looked at each other for a moment and acknowledged the order, then they were gone once more. Nice guards ya got there, although I could hear the left one move before we entered the room. Naruto fell down on the couch as Gaara sat down behind his desk. I just need to get one thing done then we can start. There is a room ready over there, can you start preparing? Gaara vaguely pointed over to the side room as he pulled out a scroll and wrote something down. Entering the room Naruto saw it had no windows and was perfectly round. This will work just fine, he thought as he pulled a scroll out of his robe. Opening it he made some seals and summoned some of its contents. 6 candles appeared along with an old fuel lighter. Just why are you still carrying that old thing around? I thought that old man learned you to control even basic fire already. The Kyuubi spoke as he started lighting the candles and setting them up at equal distance from each other. I just like this thing all right. He spoke softly as he walked to the middle of the room. You could lend me a hand here you know, he said as he formed the seals that the Kyuubi instructed him before. His palm into the center of the candles he formed the last seal with one hand. From under his hand lines of B started to crawl to the candles and from there to one another. Halfway to the candles another circle was formed and Naruto stood up straight again. Told you it wasn't that hard. Gaara walked into the chamber and looked around. Naruto pointed the switch and Gaara turned it down. The room was now dark except for the candle light. Ready. Naruto looked up for a moment as Gaara nodded. They both formed one seal. The candle light faded and they were in a dark place. Only the ring of B shined brightly as did the crosses on their C. From the center point of both crosses and the circle a drop of B floated towards the others. The moment the three connected a flash of light seemed to be everywhere as they suddenly sat beside the Kyuubi. The crosses on there still glowed but faintly now. Yo! Kyuubi waved happily as he leaned against the gong in his world. Gaara looked up and down the Kyuubi. So you're the big bad demon? Gaara managed to smile mischievously as they all stood up. That would be me, yes. But don't worry, like Naruto explained, we are of no threat, but for you, now that's another story. The Kyuubi turned to Naruto. Could you try to create that landscape now? Would be handy regarding what we are up against. Naruto nodded and concentrated again. You forgot how to do it, didn't you? Kyuubi held his face with his hand as he walked towards Naruto. Kyuubi gave him a little smack to the head as he walked past him. Just focus on the mind and see it as a big genjutsu. It's only what you think that matters, nothing else. More time passed until suddenly the area started to change. The nature and the big temple around them started to fade as the lake seemed to come closer, the ground started to rumble and a large crack split up between them. The water rushed onto them and just before them it went down the crack. The three plateaus rumbled even more and began to move away from each other at a rapid pace. From the water more pillars rose up and not long after there were pillars of rock as far as the eye could see with still water between them. Did you have to make it so dramatic? Kyuubi spoke as he jumped from one pillar to another, as did Gaara, until they both reached Naruto. Maybe I shouldn't, it was fun though. He smiled broadly before standing up and turning more serious again. Anyways, shall we begin, gentlemen? Kyuubi grinned broadly before he jumped back and transformed in a more feral form. His tails came forth and he turned a few sizes bigger and quickly threw away his robe as his muscles were about to tear it apart. By the time it reached the water far below, he was as big as a house and more fox-like. Still standing on his back legs, he didn't come close to the full form, but it would be enough. Nice trick, my turn. Gaara now jumped back and sat down. For a moment he focused as suddenly he fell backwards, asleep. Naruto jumped up unnatural high, even for him. The Kyuubi launched himself towards Gaara just in time. Gaara opened his eyes with a crazy look. It was no longer Gaara. Kyuubi reached out and with one claw and S into the pillar, trapping Gaara. Long time no see, old friend. Gaara formed an insane smile as he looked right into the Kyuubi's right eye. You know what this is about. We came to make a deal. A great voice roared through the air as Naruto came falling down again. He landed perfectly on the Kyuubi's hand and sat on one of his fingers. Yuaga and the smirk left his face immediately. What is your offer? Honestly, I actually hoped you would put up more of a fight. The Kyuubi spoke with a soft tremble in his voice as he removed his paw and Naruto jumped down next to Gaara's body. I don't care what you think, I just want to get out of here. Seems like you got it better than me anyway. Gaara stood up and looked around for a bit. Come on, not even a bit of sand. He held his shoulders down disappointed and sat down again. We don't have time to play around, here is the deal. Naruto spoke for the first time. You will be able to roam free in Gaara's mind, but he will always be in control. If you have even the slightest intention of taking over, you will be imprisoned right away. He waited a moment to let it sink in until the now possessed Gaara nodded slightly. Both of you will probably be able to hear each other, but you shall not interfere too much with his life, since he will be able to create a massive world in his mind. Like this, he threw out his arm to his side and pointed to the endless pillars. Why are you doing this? He looked up at Naruto now, who was a bit stunned by the question. I have many reasons. One of them is because this will be better for both you, Gaara and Suna. Because of this, Gaara will be able to sleep again normally and you won't be able to take over then. Not only that, but because of the sleep he will regain energy that he never had. He always fought with just the leftovers of your leaking power. Now he can combine all the power you allow him to use with his own full potential. Naruto grinned again. And what do I have to do to get this freedom you speak of? And how much freedom do I actually get? The possessed Gaara sat straight up now and became more and more interested. That is up to Gaara. I have the possibility to create a clone and let him be controlled by the Kyuubi, but at any moment I can stop him, no matter what he does. I haven't done it yet, but I guess I'll try it out sooner or later, when the time is right. Naruto stood up and looked around him. Look, no matter how you take this, both you and Gaara will get better out of this. These are not all of the rules, but we will have enough time before we get to the second phase of the change. Maybe more than a few weeks, depending on how good Gaara is. Kyuubi also stood up and laughed almost soundlessly with still a demonic tone to it. How good he is with what? Gaara stood up last and looked at the other two. That's what I have been wondering all along. How exactly are you going to try and pull this off? He crossed his arms in frustration as the Kyuubi and Naruto looked at each other. You tell him. I already told Gaara. Naruto spoke coldly. Sigh, why not? The barriers protecting Gaara from you are actually poor defenses, if the time is right, that is. At moments they can be as thick as mountains and tougher than our skin, but if you find the exact moment, they are nothing but layers of paper, floating loosely from one another, easily broken. The Kyuubi stepped closer to Gaara. I had found that moment. Naruto was vulnerable and I took control of him, but it isn't my choice to control him, neither is it yours to control Gaara. In the end you will be killed quickly. If it's not by others, then it would be by us. He stepped even close, threatening him with his size. At that moment, you will have this freedom, but with some minor adjustments we can even improve it. The Kyuubi stepped back again as Naruto spoke. Single quote. They stood up and opened their eyes again. They were back in the office again. Did it work? Hinata looked over at Naruto as he came into the room. One of the servants told him they were here. Hinata was playing some sort of game with Sakura, the little girl, Temari and two more people he didn't recognize. Yay, first part is done, now he just has to figure out the second part on his own. Naruto sat down as well and looked at the table curiously. Or find someone, Sakura smiled broadly, making Naruto look up in surprise. I reckon you explained it. He moved his head to Hinata, who just nodded and focused on the game. So, turning to Temari now, you know if he has his eye on anyone. But Temari just sighed and moved one of the pieces on the board. None that I know of, but since he got promoted to Cage he rarely comes here except to train her. She nodded her head to the little girl, or to eat when there were visitors, which we rarely get. She looked over to one of the doors where a clear shadow was seen of at least two people. If you want to come in, you idiot, she said with a loud voice. The door opened silently and Shikamaru and Kankuro walked in and sat down. Not a moment later Temari smacked his head onto the table, which made half the pieces jump from their spots. Damn women, what was that for? Shikamaru held his forehead, which began turning red now. You know damn well not to peek on a lady, she said as Sakura gained a big grin and Hinata started to blush a bit. Seriously, with your brains I am amazed you let Kankuro talk you into it, Sakura mentioned as she and the little girl started preparing the board again. Naruto just laughed at the sight. So, was the view worth it? He was still snickering as he got a kick from under the table from Sakura. Oh yay, they were just relaxing and no towels in see, Kankuro would have continued his sentence was it not that something had struck him hard in the nuts. Naruto pulled him an eyebrow since none of the girls were sitting close enough to him, so he pulled his head under the table. A ball of sand was still in its place, still spinning a bit. Naruto laughed even harder as he turned to the little girl. You made me very curious now. He jumped up and came face to face with the girl, barely preventing their noses to touch each other. A few moments passed with nothing but glares from the little girl's angry face and Naruto just smiling back. Daddy is training me. She suddenly gelled as she couldn't hold the angry stare anymore and turning around, blushing red as a tomato. Naruto fell backwards and sat down trying to figure it out as the rest looked at the girl. Temari spoke up. Gaara adopted her, long story, ask him yourself. She turned back to the game like the rest now and even Kankuro and Shikamaru were joining in. That's brilliant. Naruto grinned as he began hopping back and forth in place. What time does he come back? Temari just looked at him for a moment and sighed again. You know, for a clan head you really are dense. Have you forgotten who Gaara is? Naruto just tilted his head a bit and looked confused. I can't see how you can live with this guy Hinata. Look, he never sleeps so he doesn't even has a bedroom, besides that he is always occupied with his work in the village. I told you before he rarely comes home and she always goes to him, she pointed out the little girl. Naruto took in all the information and after a second he started walking away again. Then I'll just go ask him. Don't, he has a meeting with the council right now. We already got a complaint from him as to where he was. Sakura spoke now and Hinata turned around too. Come play with us Naruto, this is a fun game. She smiled softly and Naruto hopped back to her as he grabbed a chair. I don't know, looks complicated. Gaara walked out of the room, glad it was over. Somehow he didn't get it, he had all right to take this position, he wanted to and all the people in the village, may it be after some time, wanted him in this position, him over the others. Yet the council seemed to disagree, still. Thanks to him they were making new connections with the hidden village of Rain and after the first 7 months there wasn't a singular after him. Good evening, Gaara-sama. His secretary smiled sympathetically as he walked into his office. He could tell from her voice that they brought more paperwork in, enough to keep him here all night, just like every day. But he didn't mind that much. If you'd look at it like that he'd be the perfect Cage. Not only did he never sleep, he could also do double the work a normal human could do because of that demon energy raging inside him. He sat down and grabbed the top paper of the closest pile and began reading it. Another report on the academy, student ratings, scores and, something that made him smile almost proudly, his little girl was at the top of her class already. Gaara-sama. He heard the voice of his secretary trough the paper towers. Standing up he saw that she held a small scroll. The evening report, she just said as she handed it over. made a small bow and walked out. Thanks, he almost whispered, but he saw the corners of her mouth curl into a smile as she closed the door. He leaned back and opened the report. Seems like everything goes as he should, he says out loud as he lays the report down again. All gate patrols gave a clear sign with no one incoming. Hours of reports passed by as he held his first out of 2 breaks. His assistant had already left. It was just past midnight and she always brought him tea then and left. He liked the high hours. No sound was made throughout the building and there were just about 4 or 5 others somewhere in the building. The night shift guard walked up to him and greeted him, before disappeared into whatever position he chose tonight. That was the first thing Gaara did when he became Cage, change the guards. Half the men were out to get him that were on guard duty, some of them even turned out to be for people that were against him, the council, the nobles, some of the clans in Suna, even some from other villages. He just sighed as that was the usual stuff when there was a new ruler. Part of it was to test him, part of it was really to K him. None got even near him. He had a few more minutes before the cleaner came past him and then he had to return to the office a few floors down. Somehow he liked this room more though. It was almost at the top of the building, sort of a lounge, but not quite. Maybe he would set up his office here. When he first came here there was dust everywhere. He had it cleaned out and now whenever he had guests he'd receive them here unless they joined him for dinner. Gaara walked towards the window and looked at the village. Everything seemed so peaceful, yet he knew it wasn't. A few blocks away was a small house that looked as ordinary as all the ones around it, but that was just the cover it had as it was just a tunnel down to the interrogation where they were some spies from sound. With a bit of luck he had more information on Orochimaru or Sasuke for Naruto by the end of the night. Then he saw it, some of the guards were missing. At some random higher buildings there should be guards walking around, but they weren't there. This got him worried. The men he assigned to those posts wouldn't just leave at a random moment, maybe to go to the toilet or something, but not all at the same time. He looked around for more signs but couldn't find anything. Suddenly he felt someone approaching him from behind. In a swift turn Gaara swung his arm around, a part of the sand wall attached to his arm, forming a sharp blade as he held it to the end of the one behind him. A second passed and Gaara sighed with relief as the cleaner almost burst into tears. He had forgotten about her and she was just coming up to him to ask if everything was all right. Sorry to have frightened you, but something seems wrong. Could you send the message to my brother and the guards to be alert? He asked as he brushed away one of her tears. She smiled quickly as she nodded and ran off. Turning back to the window he searched, for what he did not know, but he had to find the reason. A white bird. The game ended. The 2 persons who Naruto didn't know cleared the table and left the room. One of them took the little girl who was starting to yawn into the hall and probably to bed. A servant came in with a few drinks and placed them on the table and left again. I could get used to this, Naruto said as he gave Hinata a small K on the cheek and poured some sake in for them. Everyone else grabbed something to drink, mainly sake or tea. I don't get it though, Hinata, Temari said, half asking. Get what? She already started to get a little red in her face from the strong beverage. I mean, if I understand correctly, that demon inside Naruto is hearing, feeling and seeing everything Naruto is right now, right? I can't grasp how you can feel so comfortable knowing this, especially when you, she got a light red as she went on, well, when you two have I can't see how you can be so calm with him joining the moment. She turned to Naruto. It's not entirely like that, he can do that yes, but I will know when he doesn't. He respects our privacy, at the moment he is listening, but he asked if he could do so, Naruto said. The room went silent for a moment. You know what, I haven't tried it out yet but there couldn't be a better time. Naruto stood up and stepped back as he smiled broadly. That is, if you don't mind meeting a demon of course. Temari was stunned as was the rest as Naruto made one simple combination. The shadow clone that puffed next to him was taller than he was, not to mention that he had longer hair. The Kyuubi clone had a red tail with a black tip and the same ears. Next to that he looked like a normal man and he wore the same clothes as Naruto and also had the same smirk on his face. Only Shikamaru and Hinata didn't drop their jaw as the Kyuubi stretched out and flexed his muscles a bit. Feels good to be out again. He yawned as he sat down at the table in between Sakura and Hinata. The sound of his voice trembled the air in that same way as it did in Naruto's mind, but this time you could really feel it tremble the very air. The Kyuubi reached out to the sake and took a whole bottle in one time. I hope you don't mind my drinking, but I've been without any booze for the past 21 years. I'm kinda thirsty. He smiled broadly as he grabbed another one of the small bottles and poured in a cup this time. From one of the walls a shadow reached out and formed a man who held a halberd at the QB's head. What the hell is going on in here? He almost shouted as the QB turned around slowly. Relax, we were just having a drink, he said. As he did so he reached out with his left hand. As he almost reached the halberd a small aura of chakra was brightly visible around one finger. With that finger he touched the tip of the halberd and which curled up immediately. The guard almost freaked out but Temari ordered him away telling him it's not a big deal. Something tells me I'm not what you though of me. He grinned at Sakura who quickly looked away. Until that moment she couldn't keep her eyes off him, now she started to blush. I didn't mean to stare, but I expected to see. She stopped as she didn't find the right words to say that what the QB continued. A big bad demon fox with 9 tails, yay, me neither, he smiled innocently and he took another mouthful of sake. So, Temari finally managed to close her jaw for a moment. This is one of the many forms I can take, don't worry about it, he winked at Sakura and turned to Temari, yes. And Gaara could do this with his demon as well when he completes this ritual, you're implying? Temari asked with a determined voice. I guess so, don't know for sure though, he is more of a prankster than me so maybe you don't want him out, but if everything goes right he can take you. Be relaxed back a bit and turned his head again. Sakura was staring at him again and he just laughed. You know, Naruto never said you were so pretty. The QB grinned fox-like, almost resembling Naruto. Sakura blushed even more as she pulled her head away and tried to hide behind her drink. Stop flirting you idiot. Naruto gave the QB's head a whack and sat back down again. He knows exactly what you look like since he looked off my eyes for the last few weeks remember. Sakura glared at Naruto for a moment but let it slip again. And now, Shikamaru spoke up and made eye contact with the QB. They stared for a minute or two until the QB broke the connection. I can stay in this form for as long as I want or until Naruto cancels the effect. At the moment I'm just a weak clone, but we want to try something out soon. We found a way to transfer a lot of his and my chakra into this clone body. If we do it right I can even fight and help him if needed. Maybe even in the full 9-tail fox form, like in that fight with Gaara. A small silence fell again, but that's all just theory right now. Naruto went on. Wait a minute, how do you mean? In the fight with Gaara? Sakura looked confused but serious. Everyone was silent for a moment again until Kankuro began to laugh. What the hell is so funny about this? Sakura s her fist on the table and Kankuro's eyes became a bit wet as he continued snickering. Just that you guys over there in Konoha don't even know that your whole village was rescued by that bum over there, he pointed at Naruto, and you especially. I saw you lying somewhere around when we picked up Gaara. Naruto began to laugh as well and Hinata frowned now too. Wait a minute, we heard that Sasuke single-handed stopped that demon that Gaara supposedly was or had summoned. The mood fell down at the word Sasuke and Sakura nodded. That's what I heard as well. That's what I don't like about the old man's rule. The QB stood up and bent over the table to find another sake bottle that wasn't empty. He sat down again with a sad puppy face as there was none left. No one was allowed to talk about me or that I was imprisoned in Naruto, for Naruto's well-being, even if it meant not telling anyone that he defeated Gaara with a giant summoned toad and then transforming both of them into my fox form. He smiled at the irony of it all. Sakura and Hinata looked at Naruto who just grinned faintly. I didn't mind that he took the credit, the village was safe, right? He stood up and left the room. Wait a minute, since when does he have a summon animal? Sakura was getting more confused by the minute as more and more things she held as facts got twisted and turned upside down. Jiraiya taught him the way to summon toads before the Chunin exam, all those years ago, Hinata almost whispered as she started fumbling with her fingers again. Remember the drawing of the big toad that the Yondaime stood upon during his fight with the QB in our history books? Sakura nodded as the QB grinned wildly. Big old grumpy toad boss, still can't get it into my head how a simple boy like Naruto can even summon him, twice even, in such a short time. I mean, in the time I've spent with your village I only saw him pop up a few times throughout hundreds of years. Sakura just nodded with her mouth almost falling open. Hinata stood up as well. It's nearing midnight so we'll go get some sleep. Sakura laughed at this as she stood up as well. Not that you guys sleep much, but I need to get up early as well, so good night to you all. She nodded at the rest. Some of them stood up as well, all except Kankuro and the Kyuubi. So, how does it feel like being imprisoned in a body? Kankuro grinned as he stood up and walked to the door. Better than coming out and with no booze. The Kyuubi kept staring at his empty cup. Kankuro said something to a servant and walked back again. Tipping the Kyuubi on his shoulder, he told him to follow him. Walking off the door, they ended up in a hallway with a few doors. They took the second to the left and entered. There were two big couches with a table between them shoved in a corner. Now that's more like it. The Kyuubi almost jumped on one of the couches and grabbed one of the larger bottles of sake, poured it right into the cup he still held and emptied it immediately. Thought you'd like that, but seriously, I'm curious, how does all of this work? Are you really free from Naruto? Kankuro sat down as well and also took something to drink. Not completely, but it's a larger freedom than back in there. I still need Naruto to let me out, and he can call me back in at any moment, but I guess he wants some privacy with his woman. If you get my drift. The Kyuubi winked and Kankuro laughed as he held his cup into the air. To freedom then, he said, and sake. The Kyuubi followed. Naruto. Hinata caught up to Naruto in the hallway. Wait for me, she grabbed onto his left arm. Naruto turned his head to Hinata and kissed her forehead. The Kyuubi isn't with us tonight. Naruto started to smile but a sudden force dragged him down towards their room. Sakura moved off the hall slowly thinking about the night, until she had to stop. A small group of guards ran past her towards the exit. More servants ran behind them and she called one of them over. What's going on? The servant was almost in panic as she pulled herself loose, running if she just yelled one thing. We're under attack. Sakura ran back to her room and grabbed her standard combat gear. Moving on, she hesitated for a moment. Naruto. She yelled off the door. No response. She knocked the door harder. Suna is under attack, you idiot. Get out of there. She heard some rumbling now and someone stumbling to the door. It opened slowly and Naruto came into view, his jacket around his waist, sweaty and his head was red. He leaned a bit forward trying to hide the fact that he was erect. Behind him you could clearly see Hinata panting heavily on the bed. What? He almost said threatening as he looked at Sakura who started to blush now. Suna is under attack, you idiot. Get dressed and come out of there. Maybe they could use us. She tried to look away as Naruto dropped the jacket in shock. Quickly running back he said something to Hinata as he grabbed his combat gear as well. Hinata jumped up and a moment later she was dressed as well. The three of them started to run towards the entrance where they were joined by the Kyuubi. Kankuro told me, have you heard what the situation was? He says while they passed the door. Naruto just nodded and the Kyuubi disappeared. I'll explain it like this. Takes less time. The Kyuubi's voice trembled off Naruto's mind and in one quick flash he felt the shock of the returning memory of the clone. Alright, so some weird bird goes around the city. Why is that an attack? He says out loud after he explained what happened to Sakura and Hinata. Because, Gaara is fighting it, and it seems like the person on the bird is using bombs. Maybe this is the right time to try out that technique. The Kyuubi asked, more demandingly than asking. They saw the fight now. Gaara was floating somewhere in the sky and there were about a dozen tentacles of sand trying to hit the large bird. Every now and then one got close and a small explosion stopped it somehow. On one of the higher roofs they saw a lot of guards so they jumped up there. Glad you found us, Kankuro said as he watched four men prepare a huge crossbow sort of thing. They were holding a pillar-sized arrow that seemed very heavy. They could barely lift it with the four of them. Where is the Kyuubi? He asked. Some of the guards around him were startled to hear this. Unlike Konoha, everyone here knew about the Kyuubi. He is getting ready. The technique needs some concentration from both of us, so if you please. He stood back and sat down. Hinata and Sakura watched the fight above. Kankuro-sama. A guard yelled as he jumped to them from one side. We spotted a second man in the same Akatsuki robes as the one in the air at one of the gates. Around him are about 16. His face was in the shadows but you could hear the fear off his voice. Damn it. Any more good news? He almost yelled. Sakura, you are skilled in healing jutsus, right? He walked towards the edge of the roof and looked back over his shoulder. She nodded and walked up to the edge as well. I'll help as well. Gaara can take care of him, especially with Naruto's help, and the Kyuubi as well. She looked over at Naruto who opened one eye and nodded as well. Not a second later they launched off together with two guards. A small cloud of shadows began to form outside of Naruto. Right in front of him, the 4 guards that were preparing the crossbow stood amazed as it slowly took form. The shape transformed into a man, with closed eyes, 2 big furry ears, 9 long tails and hands a bit claw-like. He wore black pants with 2 kunai bags at both legs, a white shirt with fishnet and standard Chunin vest over it. His hair came down to the top of his back and he smiled almost maniacally. Naruto stood up and looked at him. Both of them stretched out and checked if everything was all right. Naruto grinned as well now. Seems okay to me, shall we get moving? The QB turned around and stepped towards the 4 guards, Naruto just behind his tails. Gentlemen, would you be so kind to shoot us? Naruto stepped forward and with one hand he removed the big pole of an arrow that the 4 just placed. He threw it behind him as if it was nothing. In its place Naruto sat down as the QB gave instructions to launch them up as soon as they were ready. Naruto formed a transformation jutsu in the form of the arrow he just removed, only with 2 handles at the side of the bottom and top. The QB grabbed the top handles and set his feet down. A moment later they were launched into the air together with dozens of other arrows from all over the city. Not one managed to hit their target, but the ones that did get close exploded and the man on the bird seemed to be thrown off balance. Gaara saw the QB fly up and a moment later the arrow he was flying on transformed back into Naruto. Naruto formed 2 clones that were used as a jump platform for the 2 of them and they launched towards the man. Taken by surprise he barely turned around, but it was too late. One of the claws of the QB tore down the tail of the bird and Naruto got a little higher and aimed his twin blades in a swirling motion at the man, but was too slow and he ducked. Falling down again, Naruto was caught by a small tentacle of sand and he returned to the side of Gaara. What took you so long? Gaara mentioned as he was flailing his arms around. The tentacles were still swirling around the bird and the QB had managed to grab onto the bottom of the bird. I guess he didn't expect to be fighting a demon, let alone 2. Naruto smirked as he got down again on the platform. Think you can get me near him again? Gaara didn't even nod as the platform shot out into the deep night, in a small arch around the bird. The QB had grabbed one of the feet of the bird with his legs. Hanging upside down he was making a long combination with his hands, at one moment so fast it seemed he had much more than 2. Shadows started to swirl around him as he raised his hands low, upside down so he actually seemed to lower them, and shadowy smoke seemed to flow out of them. Onto of the bird the man was calmly reattaching a new clay tail to the bird, seemingly unaware of the QB beneath him. He did however see Naruto. Kankuro landed first in front of the small robed figure. Not a moment later the rest of the group landed and he had summoned his 3 puppets. One of the guards jumped up high as the other ran straight at him. The one up high formed a fire jutsu and a dragon head of fire opened his jaw and blew out a cone of fire down on him. The man didn't move a muscle. The second guard ran around him and as he slides the last few meters he formed a seal and his hand on the ground. 4 walls of sand rose from the ground and trapped the robed figure in the cone of fire. Blue flames were still coming out of the trap but no sound was heard. The walls fell down and out of the dust cloud a metal spike shot out behind that caught the guard behind him by surprise. B dripped on the sand as the tail-like thing threw the corpse away, or the corpses, for he was perfectly split in half from top to bottom. The second guard landed a bit further behind him and grabbed 2 kunai, 1 in each hand. Hinata activated her Byakugan and was surprised by what she saw. This is impossible, she said to the others as she lowered the Byakugan again. In his entire body there is but 1 bright chakra signal. The dust started to clear and the robed figure still stood there, laughing now. That's right little girl, he said with a heavy voice. And those puppets won't do you any good boy. He glared at Kankuro with a threatening voice. Within a second the tail shot out to Kankuro. One of the puppets jumped up in front of him but was broken immediately. The tail missed him by an inch and the smaller one of the 2 puppets left launched at the man. A large amount of needles seemed to be shot from his mouth at the puppet. Most got stuck in the wood but one hit him in the end on one of the metal parts. It made just a small crack. Poison needles don't affect wooden puppets. Kankuro yelled out, but he called too soon. At the moment that the puppet came close to the man a fist shot out and hit it in the end. The whole puppet broke up and fell down. Poison doesn't, needles do. The voice crackled through the air in a deformed laughter. From behind the second guard had snuck up to him and formed a few small seals. The 2 kunai glowed with chakra and seemed to grow big as swords as sand from all around gathered on them. In one perfect movement he stuck both of them in the top of the figure. The man just turned around, the 2 handles still stuck in his back. From under his robe one arm shot out, clearly past the guard's face. Out of the side of the arm a razor blade started spinning and see into the guard's face, who jumped backwards. Sakura took the moment of distraction and launched herself at the man. A fist charged with chakra forced his way into his skull and trough. In her movement she s her other fist on the center of his back, not charged with chakra but still very powerful. The cracking of wood was heard, but Sakura didn't even look if she completed it the work, as she knew that behind her Hinata jumped right onto him. No, she had to heal the soldier before the wound was too serious. Hinata landed right in front of him. Grabbing what remained of his skull she checked his head, empty. She activated her Byakugan again. Something didn't seem right. There it still was, the center point of chakra, glowing brighter than normally, probably because it was focused in one place except spread over the body. She though, as she directed chakra to her fingertips. Better finish the job, she said, but it was already too late. Her vision grew dark and all she heard was Sakura scream her name. Naruto jumped up from the platform, avoiding some kind of small bird. When it was right beneath him it exploded, and gone was Naruto, the clone puffed off in a small cloud of smoke. The man on the bird turned around fast, scanning the area with his cyber eye, or whatever it was, Naruto thought. He had transformed into some white blob and right now he was part of the head of the bird. The guy had long blonde hair and a smooth face. Looking now he didn't even know if it was a guy or a girl, but then he opened his cloak again and lowered his left hand into some kind of bag. His C was flat, so he was probably a guy, Naruto concluded, but then something else popped up and he almost lost the concentration of the jutsu. His hand had a mouth, and it was chewing on something too. That was the end of it. Naruto lost concentration and transformed back into himself. Sitting atop the bird's head he pulled out his left-hand sword and a kunai in his right hand. He was about to jump the man from behind as something fluffy grabbed him from behind, the Kyuubi's tail. He though. Just in time, you idiot, the Kyuubi screamed as he pulled Naruto down and his claws into the bird. No bee came out, but the shadows that were flowing from his shoulders suddenly increased greatly. They surrounded the bird in a split second and in the same time it was torn apart. Now all three of them were falling and the man turned around. He stuck some white figurine into the Kyuubi's face and held his other hand out to Naruto. The Kyuubi let go of Naruto and tried to grab the white stuff that started to grow. Small tentacles came out of it that wrapped around his head and expanded by the second. Naruto blocked the hand with the kunai and was disgusted with the sight he saw. This hand had a mouth as well that bit on the kunai and was slowly chewing off the metal. Naruto swung his other arm around and chopped his right arm off with the sword. A clean C. The man screamed as he grabbed onto it. The chewing stopped and Naruto suddenly realized something. He was still falling. Trying to turn around in the air he activated a few seals with one hand. He already let go of the standard kunai, and placed the sword back in its sheath. Pulling out one of the adjusted kunais he threw it up and formed the last seal of his father's famous technique. In one bright yellow line he was launched upwards. A second later he passed the kunai. Not that it was a problem, he was going up and hey, what goes up always comes down. Please tell me that wasn't your kunai that you passed. The Kyuubi's voice trembled off his mind again. I thought I felt you coming back. What happened? Naruto tried to say aloud but couldn't because of his speed and the wind gushing into his face, so he thought it. I think I got my head blown off, not sure though. Look down and we know. So Naruto did. He saw a small crater but a moment later he saw the town as a small circle in the sand. This is why I hate it when you do this, the Kyuubi continued. Why? Naruto almost shouted back. A cold feeling started to grip him. The stars seemed to come closer and the air grew thick. Then it all went black. Because I like life, you be moron. A woman walked into the darkened room slowly. Bowing down by the two sleeping figures she picked up a new stick of incense and after lighting it she placed it down carefully in the holding box. Slowly, smoke came out of the few holes. It was a beautiful rectangular shaped box, and on the large sides and the lid, there was a carving of a long eastern dragon. The smoke swirled up from their noses and filled the room with a lavender smell. The woman left the room as quietly as she entered. Neither of the figures moved a muscle, yet their minds were both in chaos. Baki looked up. Some of the men claimed they saw a line of yellow light flash up into the clouds high above. He only saw one figure falling fast. Without a second thought he gave the signal and 20 men flew past him, into the shadows of the city to secure the Akatsuki attacker. Spinning around, he looked at the gate. A loud crash had come from it, and all they could see now was smoke. Not his responsibility at the moment. A team was already on its way. I assume you have everything in control. Gaara's voice trembled beside him. So far so good. Baki jumped onto the floating platform of sand, and the two of them turned around towards the last Akatsuki. As they were nearing it, they saw a ground team already working on removing some rubble here and there. A healer was bowing over Sakura, who seemed to awake just as they landed. Everyone stand aside, Baki yelled. Gaara raised his hands, and mere seconds later the pile of rubble had slipped back into a perfect floor and two walls. There were corpses all around. In the middle of it lay some thorn Akatsuki robes and a lot of wood. Sakura ran over to Hinata, quickly scanning her body. A rough focus on the two needles that appeared to be stuck in her right hip showed her that a poison was quickly spreading across her leg and up through her body. I need a med team right now. Sakura yelled as she bent over Hinata again and attempted to hinder the poison. What happened? Baki asked as one of the healers helped the man who was C in the face. We saw one crouched figure. Jin and I immediately used the box dragon technique, but he just did nothing but laugh. Then some kind of tail crashed open the wall and see him in half. Next thing I know, one of those Konoha girls yelled he had only one chakra point, and I tried to attack. Instead of hitting me, he perfectly missed, but erected blades from his arm and gave me this C. The healer already cleaned it out. I'm lucky to be alive, sir. Seems this was the only weapon without poison that he possessed. Sir, he quickly said as Baki helped the man stand up. And the Akatsuki? He's right there, sir, he pointing at a small figure close to Sakura and Hinata. Gaara walked over to the man. When he got closer, it seemed to be a puppet. Most of his body had been crushed by the rocks around it, but as he turned it around, the moonlight shined brightly on the face. Open eyes met his in a panicky stare. Baki, get some of the men to collect these doll parts, and I want a list of all the men who est tonight. The other one is already under interrogation as we speak. He gently picked up the head of the doll and turned it around in his hands this way and that. I think we have to welcome an old friend. Behind the right ear was a small logo that he recognized all too well, for they had been marked on most of the dolls in use in their village, even now after all these years. Sasori of the Red Sand. Another basket of herbs was carried inside the lab where Sakura was hurriedly working on an antidote. She was lucky still. She had stopped the poison from spreading but was still deteriorating Hinata's leg and part of her torso. So far, not much had helped, and no one had even told her anything about Naruto yet. Elsewhere, Shikamaru entered the new office of Gaara, since his old one had blown up that night. Any word of your scouts yet? Gaara faced the window and held a small scroll before him. Nothing yet, but let me get this straight. He turned and looked him straight in the eye. The yellow flash some of the men saw was the Flying Thunder God technique, not seen since the fall of the Yondaime. It works by throwing a kunai at an incredible distance, then you will fly after it, so to speak, and catch it to stop. Right. Shikamaru nodded slightly. My scouts did find this. Gaara produced Naruto's kunai from his desk. What does this mean, Shikamaru? Gaara sat down, and after he had handed the kunai over to Shikamaru, who also sat down and studied it for some time. As far as I know, this happened once or twice before, but those times he both went in a horizontal line. One time he into a mountain, and the other time he left the town several miles into a straight line. It took us quite some effort to cover up all the damage it caused. They remained silent for a moment or two, then a knock on the door interrupted them. Enter. A soldier walked in and stood to attention. Sir, it seems that several miles east from town something fell out of the sky and left a giant cloud of smoke, sir. With the wind turning as it is, we expect it to be cleared up in a matter of minutes, sir. Gaara nodded and dismissed the man. Any chance he could have survived that fall? Gaara stood up and headed for the door. Knowing Naruto, he found a way. What now? Shikamaru followed him as they went into the hall. Now we need to consult someone who knows of more of Sasori, he said, as he led the way out. Oi, idiot, wake up. Naruto scratched his head and turned around in the sand, slowly forming a puddle of drool around his mouth. Let me sleep, he yawned. No time for that now, your little stunt nearly took our lives. The Kyuubi shouted from the inside his head. Slowly, Naruto gained consciousness and sat up. He appeared to sit in the shade of a large crater, him being in the middle. What happened? He tried to stand up. A strong pain surged up his legs and forced him to fall down again. Looking at his legs, he could see they were slowly growing back. His pants were torn and slightly scorched, and he had no feet. Yay, we landed harsh, but I could prevent your spine from breaking. The massive voice of the QB filled his head and images flashed by of the night before. If you could let me out, I'll try to heal you up a bit. Then we can start walking back to Sooner again if you don't mind. He obediently raised his hands, formed the right chain of combinations, and a moment later the QB sat next to him. At the same instant everything went black again. Seriously, Kit, if it wasn't for me you'd be either much better off or as a fish in the desert. He sighed, focused his chakra and started working on Naruto's battered body. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.